So what I learned from that day is that there's not one door that opens up all the doors to opportunity, but what happens is there's a door of opportunity that opens up, and then when you go through that door, there's another series of doors. And so one door doesn't open all would probably be the biggest lessons I've learned on the way to growing as an individual and as a business owner. Hi, my name is Chris Robinson. I'm a speaker, business strategist, and executive vice president of Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. I've spent over 2 decades coaching executives, business owners, and high-performing teams on how to lead with influence, clarity, and confidence. Too many leaders focus on what they do, but the real question is, who are you becoming as a leader? But if working personally with author John Maxwell has taught me one thing, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I strive to connect just as much as I communicate. Everyone I speak to has a goal. All the organizations I speak for have goals, but whether it's complacency or lack of clarity or struggles, we often just don't feel empowered or equipped to reach our full potential. It just takes the right catalyst to help us see our breakthrough. After I discovered leadership development, I was able to use my position as a senior sales manager to scale with an organization from 18 employees to over 700. And that commitment to growth has absolutely changed my life. After more than 2 decades in the leadership industry, I'm serving as the executive vice president of the world's leading coaching organization, playing a part in the growth of hundreds of thousands worldwide. And it's my mission to bring breakthrough to many more.
Your new book, which comes out September 2nd, is called From Drift to Drive, A High Achiever's Guide to Breaking the Chains of Complacency. So in this book, you describe or define complacency as that secret place of satisfactory success.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of how that can manifest for someone?
Yeah, a secret place of satisfactory success, that's really where that good is good enough area of our life. It may be something, a skill set, or something that we pursued with a lot of passion very early on, and then we got proficient in that particular skill set. And then what happens is now I know how to do that. I've done that. I've done this a bunch of different ways. It's good enough. We're on a scale of 1 to 10, it may be a 8, and there's still potential there. All right. But the work that's required to close that gap is so hard that oftentimes we just say, hey, it's good enough. And what happens is when we don't continue to pursue that gap between our good and our potential, there's a drift that happens, and drift doesn't happen forward. It always happens backwards. And so what could be our gifting, what could be our great skill set can also lead to some detriment in our life if we don't continue to sharpen it and hone it, and if we just allow for it to be average.
It reminds me of that Michael Hyatt quote, you never drift to a desired destination.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. And complacency, I can see too, one of the things you talk about in your book is you distinguish between, there's a difference between complacency and laziness. Oftentimes when we think complacency, we think of people that are just lazy, and you're careful to point out the difference between that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's the most common thought when we talk about complacency is we think of apathy or we think of laziness. And, really complacency is, I think, the best term for it. If you go back to its original meaning, it's careless security. Careless security, meaning like we're good with it, but we're not doing anything to protect it, fortify it, or make it better. Now, the Japanese have a term for it, which they use called sensu. And sensu is the Japanese term for victory disease. And that may be a term that people are more familiar with, is where we get to a certain place. We win the Super Bowl, but we do not do the work required to go back and win it again. It's much harder. And so we've got the ring, we've got the trophy, we've got the award, we've got the promotion. And then now that we've got it, we kind of sit back on our laurels a little bit and we drift.
Would you say what's the biggest difference between those who fall victim to complacency or that satisfactory place of success and those that never seem to get caught up in it? Is there one trait or one quality or one action that they take that usually keeps them out of that complacent trap?
Well, there's not a way to not 100% to be 100% out of complacency in all areas of our life. And so it's kind of like whack-a-mole, where the old game that we played when we were kids, when it would pop up and then we would hit the one. That's how complacency is. So you may not be complacent in one area of your life, but there could be another area of your life that you've just drifted and you don't give attention to. And so what we have to do is we have to consistently evaluate and be aware of where complacency might be showing up. And for me, now that I've researched it, now that I've been writing on it, now that I've been talking about it, man, I'll be honest with you, I've got complacency popping up all the time in my life going, well, why haven't I moved in this particular area? Complacency. Why haven't I done this? Complacency. Like, it's good enough. It's comfortable. And so complacency, it looks like busyness, right? It feels like comfort, but then it sounds like excuses. And so we need to understand that busyness does not mean that we're not complacent, that, being comfortable doesn't mean that we're not complacent. And our really great reasons for not growing those areas is not a reason as well that we're not complacent in that area. So we've got to be aware of it. We've got to be on the lookout for it if we're going to catch it and stomp it out.
One of the big things I've seen trip people up, who I would describe as complacent, even times in my life in which I'm saying, man, that was a really complacent period of my life. I can say that oftentimes it's the mixed messaging that their brain gets, because on the one hand, they hear, oh, you should be content, you should pursue contentment. And I love how in the book you talk about the difference between contentment and complacent, because they're not the same thing, and nor should the desire to achieve contentment be a reason to slide into complacency. So tell me a little bit more about like the markers. How can you tell that, like, what is the difference
Yeah.
between someone who is pursuing contentment versus someone that's sliding into complacency?
Yeah, contentment is really a mindset. And again, I don't want anybody to think that this is a hustle grind drive book. This is fine, just being aware and being intentional and not automated in your growth or your direction. And so when it comes to contentment, what that means is that, there's a fulfillment, that there is a wholeness in where you're at. But complacency is really a shutting down or really a fixed mindset when it comes to it. So contentment can still say that, hey, I'm here right now, but there's some things I can improve on in order to grow in this area. Where complacency will say, it's good, it is what it is, this is the way that we've always done it, and we stay there. And so when I think about the difference between commitment, I think there's still a growth mindset that's open in contentment, but with complacency, you're fixed and the mindset's shut down.
So in the book, you lay out a 7-step framework that helps take people from drift to drive.
Yeah.
Can you just list out just high level each of those 7 steps, and then we're going to drill down into one of them in a minute.
Yeah. So the first step is clarity. Have to be clear on what it is that you want. Second step is gathering. Anytime that you want to grow in a specific area, you have to gather information around that specific topic. The third thing is filtering. This is where you're pulling out what's relevant and what's good for you, because we've got access to all the information in the world. But if we don't filter it and layer the learning, we get distracted and run astray. The fourth step in there is guidance, and that's truly reaching out and getting a guide or a mentor in your life that can help you in that specific skill set which you're trying to learn. The next step is relationships, getting around like-minded people that are also moving in that direction. Not just successful people for the sake of being around successful people, but successful people that are moving in the direction that you want to, build relationships there. The sixth step would be action, and that's actually doing something about what it is that you're learning. And then the seventh step is evaluation, and that's that true, honest evaluation of the results that you got, the actions that you took, to spin you right back into clarity and clarification on your vision. If you do that cycle over and over again, I'm telling you, you're going to move through life faster.
Let's hit the first of those 7 steps in a little bit more detail. The subtitle of the chapter on clarity is "You Cannot Have What You Cannot See." And in that chapter, you talk about something called the Hyperopia Myopia paradox. Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, so basically what happens is there's a trap when it comes to clarity. And the trap is that it's confusion by overwhelm, and we have a lack of specificity that leads to confusion, and that leads to complacency. And in the book, we typically fall into one of two categories, and our goal is to kind of find that middle ground. So the first type of person that's listed might have what we call complacency myopia. Now, myopia is an optometry term for nearsightedness. Now, this person, they are busy all the time. Now, remember, complacency looks
Mm.
like busyness, right? And so this person, they will be studying, researching how to start a podcast this week. Next week, they are studying how to write a book. Next week, they're studying, and they are busy the whole entire time, but they have no idea where they're going. So they have what we call complacency myopia. Now, complacency
Mm.
hyperopia, that's the person that's farsighted. They've got the vision down. They know exactly where they want to go. I mean, they can see the big picture, but they have no idea how to take the first step. In fact, Will, on a recent webinar that I was on, there was a person in the chat asking this exact question. They said, I know exactly where I want to go. I just don't know where to start. And I thought, oh my goodness, hyperopia right here in the flesh,
Yep.
not knowing how to take that next step. So, what we need to do is we need to gather that 2020 vision where we know where we're going and that we know, hey, what's a step that I can take? Doesn't necessarily have to be the right step, but take a step towards it. And when we begin to take action, action always reveals the next step.
Mm. You mentioned something earlier about hustle culture, and I like how in the third section of your book you touch on the topic of hustle culture. And what you write is hustle culture has been the it girl in entrepreneurship and personal development for the last 20 years or so. It's a quick solution thrown at any roadblock or excuse when someone isn't hitting their targets.
Right.
You go on and say, if you think the solution to complacency is hustle, then I'm throwing a traffic cone right here in the middle of the road. Hustle is not necessary and it's dangerous. So tell me more. What is it about the trend? And let's
Yeah.
face it, it's a 20-year trend now of hustle culture that makes you say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is that I see people that are busy but not productive. They're busy, but they're not productive. If we go all the way back to John Maxwell's book, The 21 Laws of Leadership, in the Law of Priorities, he asked us a very simple question. He said, when you're in pursuit and you're busy, ask yourself, what am I accomplishing versus what am I doing? And that's a big shift. And right now, with all of the hustle, do 10 side jobs, do this, do that. Look, if you can focus on the one thing, if you have clarity on that and you're doing the 3 to 4 things you need to do every single day, then great, do that. But if you're trying to do 10 things, and I used to do this, Will, I would teach this with passion, with fire, with fervor. Set 5 goals in 5 areas of your life. And I remember looking up at my board one day and I had 5 goals in 5 areas of my life. I had 25 goals. I was busy every single day. I was hustling every single day, but I wasn't accomplishing anything in that mindset. And so let's get clear on what it is that you want. Let's chisel down, do what you need to do, get done what you need to get done, and then go do what you want to go do.
Yeah, it's interesting because John Maxwell is known for saying experience isn't the best teacher because if it were, everyone would get better as they got older. He distinguishes this by saying that it is evaluated experience that is the best teacher. And I noticed in your 7 steps to go from drift to drive that you have evaluating as step 7. Is that by accident or
Yeah,
is this
no,
something you've seen as a profound truth in your life?
that profound truth. You know, it's step 7 because you can actually short circuit the entire 7 step cycle. And if I had to short circuit it, it would be clarity, it would be gathering, learn a little bit, and then it would be do a little bit, step 6. But you cannot go and do that again until you evaluate. You have to take a look at the results and then say, hey, what did I learn? What did I like? What can I do differently? What did I learn? What did I like? What can I do differently? Because you just can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get a different result. And so you want to make sure that you're evaluating. But the problem with the valuation and the trap that people fall into is that they peak too soon. And what I mean by that is that they say, well, Chris, I am evaluating. I did this and I didn't get the result that I wanted. Okay. But it's kind of like, growing corn. If I went out and I threw some corn right there in your front yard, Will, and I came back the next day and said, well, I gathered information. I knew that I had to get some corn. I got some corn. I took the action. I threw the corn in the grass. And then today I come back and say, I'm evaluating today. There's no corn. Well, you look at me like I was crazy. Why? Because there's a gestation process to everything. There's seed, there's time, and then there's a harvest. And so the evaluation phase is to really kind of check your actions, your heart, your motive, but looking at the actual result, you have to dismiss until you go through that cycle again to see, hey, is this really moving me in the direction that I want to go?
Speaking of evaluating, let's do some of this in real time. If you were to go back, say 10 years,
Yeah.
what's one thing
Oh,
like today,
yeah.
either in life or business, that you know to be true that you had no idea was true 10 years ago? In fact, you might have believed the opposite 10 years ago. What is it that's that 10-year difference? You're like, hey, looking back 10 years ago, I didn't think this was true at all, but now I know for a fact that this is true.
Right. Yeah. It was going back just to the example I just gave you. 10 years ago, I was telling you I was teaching with fire, 5 goals, 5 areas, and it was just this blind ambition and passion to just do all these different things. And I don't want anybody to shrink back their ambition. But what I'm saying is that now I fully believe that, hey, you shouldn't have 25 goals in a single year. Like there should be one, two, three things that you put all your effort into. And if you do that, you're going to move through those things a whole lot faster than if you're being distracted. I think Rory Vaden said it best yesterday. He said it best yesterday when I was on with him, and he said that, you know, when we disperse our energy into different areas, what happens is we have diminished returns. And so I'd rather have all of my energy going at one thing now versus a little bit of energy going at 25 different things. And I wholeheartedly believed that whole strategy a decade ago.
Yeah, and so let's move it up even further. What's one thing you know is true today that you had no idea was true 1 year ago?
Ooh, yeah. We're talking here about a book, and I did not realize the hard work it takes to move thousands of books. Now we are in pre-sale right now, and we've moved a couple thousand books, almost 3,000 books in the first 30 days. But the average book sells 250 books in the first year and 1,000 over its lifetime. I had no idea the hard work that it takes and is required. And so my admiration for a John Maxwell or for any author that sells more than 1,000 books, more than 250 books, you know, is my goodness is off the charts now because I just didn't know. It's hard work. It's hard work.
Well, speaking of the book, so the book From Drift to Drive comes out on September 2nd, but people can pre-order today. If they're seeing this in July, August, they can pre-order today. So where can they do that?
Yeah, so they can pick that up at drifttodrivebook.com. And then there's a couple options for Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, wherever you like to shop. The reason I send you there to drifttodrivebook.com is because we've got lots of bonuses for you that you can get by putting in your confirmation number there. And I want you to get those bonuses. So you're going to get the first 2 chapters of the book before it comes out. You're going to get access to a master class. You're going to get access to a virtual ticket. So there's just a lot of great bonuses that you get from picking up the book there and putting in that confirmation code. So drifttodrivebook.com.
Chris, thanks. This was extremely enlightening. I was able to get a pre-advanced copy, a PDF of the book, and started reading it. And I thought, I think this is the best book I have read this year,
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm recommending it to everybody when it comes out. So I really appreciate your being on here and giving us some more information about it. So it's good.
Hey, thanks.
All
Thank you.
right, thanks so much.